Sir Robert Laird Borden, 1854 to 1937. Who was Robert Borden? Robert Borden was Canada's Prime Minister from 1911 to 1917, and then when he was re-elected from 1917 to 1920. While he was in power, Borden's most important achievements were leading Canada through World War I, giving women the right to vote in 1918, and representing the Canadian delegation at the Peace Treaty Conference in Paris, France, after the war. Borden's effect on World War I. Robert Borden managed to lead Canada through the most difficult time in Canada's history. During the war, because not enough men were volunteering for the war, the conscription law was introduced. Conscription, or drafting, is the compulsory enlistment of a male into the military service. This was a positive thing because it helped Canada create a stronger military and overall resulted in Canada winning many important battles during World War I. Borden really believed that Canada should make a difference in the war, which led to the conscription and the income tax. As a result, Britain saw Canada as a more independent nation, which was one step closer to Canada becoming its own nation. Women's right to vote. At the time of the Confederation, the right to vote was limited to white males that owned their own property. Robert Borden started the reality of women having the right to vote in elections. In 1917, part of the War Times Election Act was the wives, mothers, and sisters were allowed to vote if they had a man serving in the war. If you were a woman serving in the armed forces, you also had the right to vote. In 1917, most Canadian women over 21 had the right to vote in all of the federal elections. Represented Canada at the Treaty of Versailles. In 1919, Sir Robert Borden represented the Canadian people at the Treaty of Versailles, which meant that World War I was coming to a formal, peaceful ending. At the Peace Conference in Paris, Borden insisted that Canada should have equal representation as Belgium and other small countries that had attended the conference. When the peace treaty had to be signed, Borden insisted that instead of it being signed on behalf of Britain, it be signed on behalf of Canada itself. Essentially, Robert Borden was so insistent on Canada being represented as its own nation rather than a colony of Britain. Borden represented Canada at the Peace Conference, which shows a lot about what type of leader he really was. In conclusion, for his time, Robert Borden made Canada a better country and created another step towards the women's rights movement. Borden was a great Canadian, and his actions and achievements will be remembered for a very long time.